Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. Today, we're really excited to review the latest release and the first one in a decade from David Bowie, called The Next Day. David Bowie. Everyone knows who David Bowie is. If not, then shame on you. Tom, who is David Bowie?
He's the guy from Labyrinth.
Oh, yeah.
No, but really, this guy is, in my opinion, pretty much a musical god.
Mm-hmm.
He has been around for a long time. He's put out some of the most landmark albums in history, and he's really kind of the king of reinvention. He always and if he's the king of reinvention, I would call Beck the prince of reinvention.
True.
What do you think about that? I mean, Beck's been doing that for like the last 20 years, reinventing himself pretty much every album. This guy's been doing that for about twice as long.
Right.
So just what he's been able to accomplish in his career is huge to me, and it's inspiring. But when it comes to The Next Day, it's kind of interesting how this comes at so far in his career. Just from looking at the album cover alone, it pays tribute to his album Heroes, which is interesting that he's drawing that comparison right away, because I think that's the era of David Bowie, that kind of late 70s era, even some of the mid 70s stuff that this sounds the most like, as far as songwriting style is concerned. Now, he's definitely doing some very different things here, though, than you would hear him do back then. I would argue that the biggest difference is that this just, to me, and this is going to sound worse than I mean it just sounds a little uninspired.
Sure.
I feel like back then he really was trying to make a point, he had something to say, and he did. And here, it's not like this album is bad because of it, but it's just that this guy has already done so much. He's not trying to reinvent the wheel again.
Well, what's he gonna do?
He's just trying to be good old
Yeah,
Bowie.
I mean, it's not a hip-hop album.
Yeah.
It's not, prog rock or anything like that. It's not even the glam rock that he really got famous for, but it's, this is just Bowie doing what Bowie does, writing really good Bowie-esque tracks. And I feel like there's several songs on this album, Tom, that I really like, that I know you really like, that are just clear highlights. Like, you really like Dirty Boys. I like the first 4 tracks on this album, to be honest. And I know that, we both really like the track 8, I'd Rather Be High.
Yeah, that song's great.
It's a great song because of all the different things that he's doing. These are complex arrangements, though.
Yes,
very much. These aren't simple. And actually, you from time to time you hear some like crazy drums, like something that we heard when we reviewed Earthling.
Yeah.
Which I know
those kind of jungle beats.
Right. And you hear a lot of that on the album, but you also hear, saxophone, piano, guitar, bass, like all this stuff is going on. There's tons of layers in every single
classic
track.
70s Bowie arrangement.
Absolutely. And the only thing that I have with that is dynamics.
Yeah.
And one thing that I noticed on this album is, and keep in mind, this is getting a massive amount of praise. Everyone is loving The Next Day, and that's totally cool. I really kind of expected that, because anytime something from like Leonard Cohen, David Bowie, any significant artist, legendary artist that has come out with a new album, usually gets a lot of praise. And so rightfully so, The Next Day is getting looked at. Now, I personally did not feel that, it's fully living up to that praise. And the reason is because a lot of these tracks, while very, well written and fun to listen to, several of them don't pay attention to dynamics at all. It's just loud. Boom. Here's this really loud track from start to finish. You have, 3 minutes of just really loud David Bowie 70s tracks. And, occasionally I like that, but it has to be positioned right in the album, and that's the key.
And the dynamics, I agree that they are a little lacking within songs. I think they're there on the scope of the whole album, but I would say that the softer tracks on this album I found to be the more disappointing tracks.
They're definitely weaker.
Yeah.
Like track 5, Where Are We Now?
Where Are We Now?
And the closer, Heat, even, was, while that was kind of a cool track, I didn't really feel like it truly fit this album. And personally, this is a 14-track album. It's 53 minutes, but it feels like 65. And that's me personally, Tom. I don't know if you agree with that. And the reason for me is that I found that I really got into several tracks on this album, about 2/3 of them. And then the other 1/3 just didn't get me. And I didn't feel like, a couple of those, I feel like truly were lesser quality than the others, but I felt like some of them were just, like the good tracks stood out, and the other tracks were just kind of almost filler tracks. If Bowie could even write a filler track,
Yeah.
it would be a Bowie filler track. And I just feel like those could have been taken out. The album could have been albumized a bit more to focus more on flow. Because really what we have here is, I don't feel like we have, a legendary album. I feel like it's a compilation of songs from a legendary artist.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And once again, if we're going to be comparing it to some of the stuff he was doing in the late 70s, look at his album Station to Station. That only had a handful of tracks on it. This had way more tracks on it, but just they're more brief. They don't really establish much of a big idea.
Right.
He's just kind of going for these shorter songs, and that's why he put so many of them on here.
Yeah. I feel like if you were to come across really any of these tracks in like a Pandora or Spotify or any sort of playlist, you would really like them. I mean, if you're at all a fan of David Bowie's work, you would really like them. But the thing is that when we're reviewing albums, we're reviewing how does this album play as like a record, like the Dark Side of the Moon-esque record where you put it on from start to finish and it just kicks your ass and flows as one piece of work, however long that the album is. And this I don't feel like does that. I feel it's too segmented. It's too much of a compilation.
And another thing I want to point out too is that while this is a David Bowie album, and as I've said, the guy is huge. He's a legend in music. That's a good reason to check it out for sure. But that doesn't necessarily mean you need to love it, and it doesn't mean that everything the guy comes out with is going to be stellar. I think this is a good album. I don't think it lives up to the hype, but it's kind of like we said about Leonard Cohen's album Old Ideas. That
Absolutely.
when that came out, we were saying, think about this. If this was a debut album, if this was from a no-name artist, would you still think that it's as good as you think it is?
Is it really worth an 86,
Yeah.
87? Is it really that if this were a debut album?
And I would say no.
No,
definitely.
it's still
right?
good.
It's still good.
It's still good.
very
and,
good.
And a lot of these tracks here are tracks that I really enjoyed listening to. In fact, the more I listened to it, I gave this 6 or 7 listens.
Yeah.
By the end of that, I was really liking, obviously more than the majority of these tracks. So those tracks I'm going to be listening to all year. It's just hopefully, I probably won't ever come back to the ones that I didn't like.
Yeah.
And whenever you have track displacement like that, it just hurts the comeback quality of the album.
Definitely
So
does. Yeah.
I think right now I still think it's a good album. I'm going to go 71.
I'm going 78.
Cool. Mid-70s from Velocities in music. That means this is solid. Not as good as everyone else seems to think it is, which there's nothing wrong with that. If you guys are loving The Next Day and, you're just big David Bowie fans in general, that's totally awesome. We're glad. Please tell us, what your favorite David Bowie album is and
There's
what...
so many.
Oh, yeah, I know. And tell us also, what you loved about The Next Day, because we definitely, we're excited to review this one. Let us know. Shoot us a comment at www.velocitiesofmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesofmusic. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and tell us what albums for 2013 you want to see us review. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.